Hey folks, I hope everybody's doing well. Once again, I had a little bit of a challenge getting this started. I hit the go live button and it didn't seem like it went live right off the bat, but hopefully we're all caught up right now. Looks like everybody's doing well out there. And if you can't hear me or it's not working, then let me know in the comments so that I don't just keep rambling. I do have an iPad over to the side to try to see if my picture's up there, and I see it's up there, but I don't have any volume on it because it'll throw me off. So yeah, the countdown was a little bit off, and that's because I hit go live and then I hit the countdown, but the countdown and the go live didn't coordinate together. So anyway, just wanted to catch up. Looks like everybody's been catching up with each other out there, so that's a good thing. I wanted to talk about a couple things in this live. First thing I wanted to do is talk about the 800-pound gorilla, possibly, or whatever you want to call it. And that is, people have asked about my health a couple times because they knew I was going on a road trip and I put it off. And I did talk to my doctor about some, boy, it feels like I'm tilted on the chair here. I did talk to my doctor about some AFib indications that came up on my Apple Watch. He suggested I go to a cardiologist. I went to a cardiologist. This is all in the last 3 weeks, so I may be repeating myself for some of you. And they put a heart monitor on me. I turned off the heart monitor today and mailed it back in. They'll read the report. But when I did go to the cardiologist, he said he didn't think it was real AFib after he did his EKG inside of the office. So right now, I'm thinking everything's going to be okay, and I'm trying to decide whether I go on a road trip or not. Still in the stages of thinking it through, and that's only because I had a bunch of commission orders come in, and I went ahead and accepted them. So I think everything's good there. Ask you to put some question marks or something in front of anything that's an actual question, so I know you're just not talking to each other. With that, let's get started in the stuff that I thought would be of interest to some of you. And that's always a hard part with me. I am not just focused on one thing. I'm a multifaceted, or maybe you might say schizophrenic individual when it comes to making. I like all kinds of different aspects. I started out with my CNC, and then I graduated to my laser, then 3D printing. And frankly, I wander all over the place and wherever my mind or interest goes. And recently, my mind has gone to 3D printing with multicolor prints. I've gone down a rabbit hole there. So one of the things I want to talk about today is how I got down that rabbit hole. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I found for others that might be interested in 3D printing, especially if you have a bamboo with an AMS, because that makes it a lot easier, although that's not required. You can manually change out your filaments if you want, and there's all kinds of abilities out there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about an epoxy project I'm working on with a client and how to try to match up some colors and what I was doing with that. And then I'll talk a little bit about a measurement chart that I was working on. So we'll see how much time we have to get through that stuff. And I'll be looking for comments in the comment section or questions or additional information people want to share. So please feel free to do so. Let's start out with multicolor printing and how I got down that rabbit hole. So I will start out with, let me bring up a picture here. All right, hopefully you can all see that. Around the 4th of July, I was messing around with things, and I was on the Bamboo Maker World. Some of you may be familiar with that. And I saw some coasters pop up that you could make, and they were multicolor. I said, well, I've got an AMS. Let's go check that out. So these are files that they already developed. I printed them and started making some of these. And then I started making some more. And then after I was watching, some of you may remember the coaster, not the coaster, but let me go back for a second to our visit last 2 weeks ago. Some of you may remember Shane talked about how these went viral on him, and he just started selling these like crazy. And after that episode with Shane, I said, hey, Shane, you want to sell me that file? He said, no, Rob, I'll give you that file. And so I took his file, which of course was a vectric file that he was using, but it had an SVG in it. And I started investigating how I could make my own color prints. And so after I investigated that for a while, I went and spoke with, I went to the YouTube world out there. Let's see if I can bring up some examples here. And I started exploring with different people. Here's one of the guys that I saw about how you can turn an SVG into a 3D print. And I can put links in the stream at the bottom if you want. But okay, Lucky says, just in case I want to dive into the rabbit hole with you, do you have a printer recommendation and what not to purchase? Okay, I do have a printer recommendation. After using mine I got it 6 months ago, and talking to several other people and doing a lot of investigation. If you want to go cheaper, you can go with a cheaper Bamboo. They got a P1P and others, but they don't come with what you call a AMS system, which means it's a system where you can have multiple rolls of filament that feed into the machine at one time. And so all of the Bamboo printers so far that I've investigated are good, but I went right top notch to one called an X1C, and I'll put a link in the video description at the end of this video for Bamboo printers so that you can go look at them yourself. And I did put in for an affiliate code. I don't know whether they've given me one yet or not, but it doesn't matter. I'll put a link in at the end of this show in the post-it notes. And so the one I recommend is the Bamboo X1C, X1 Carbon. It comes with AMS, which means multiple spool rolls on it. And I think you'll see one in the background sooner or later here, one of these things. And it will allow you to do this real easy. And they're pretty fail-proof for the most part. And so that's why I recommend it, is because you can get started real easy in doing all kinds of cool things. So I do recommend the Bamboo. So I got down this path of wanting to do multicolor, and I started, there's all kinds of YouTube videos on here. And so the first one I actually did, then if we come back over here, is I took Shane's item that he had given me, and I took the SVG from his board and I turned it into this 3-color print. And I was pretty amazed at how easy it was to do that. And so that started me down the rabbit hole. And then I got even more excited when I ran into a guy. He was seeing what we were doing on this channel and other things. I don't know if he's out there in the chat or not, but his name is Russ Gare. And Russ Gare started sending me pictures of things he'd been working on. And there is an example of a multicolor print using a program called HueForge. Now, let's see if I can hide this now. So he was using a program. Oh, there Russ says he's here. So he was using a program called HueForge, or he hasn't started using that program so much as finding files that were created with that program. And my late wife was from Missouri, and she was a huge Cardinal fan, and just loved the birds and the state. And Russ sent us, this was his first picture of a multicolor that he sent me. And wouldn't you know it, it just spoke to me because of my late wife's fascination with them. So I said, wow, so how did you do that, Russ? He said, well, I used my 3D printer. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, that's how I did it. So then when he did that, I had to start investigating this further. And then he started sending me additional prints. Let's see if I can get these pop up. So here's an owl that he recently did. And when you look at the colors, he was using translucent filament. Then this one here is a lithophane. I don't know how many of you know what lithophanes are, but 3D printers can do lithophanes, and you put a light behind it. And as you put a light behind it, you can actually use, this one's not as colorful as I've seen others, but some of them, by the way, Russ has a bamboo X1C, just like I talked about, like I recommended to Lucky Duck. And that's what kind of printer he has. But he's one step on me. He's got either 8 or 12 filaments available. He has at least 2 AMSs connected to one of his printers. He's got 2 or 3 printers, by the way. So this is a lithophane. And so you can look up what lithophanes are. And they're pretty impressive because you put lights behind them. And you can actually put a photo on your 3D print, and it will show through as a photo with different colors. So then the next print he sent me was, hey, he said, hey, have you ever heard of Slimer from Ghostbusters? And so he sent me this one. And I think Russ, you can put in the comments, I think Russ said that it was a 4-color print, and that they use green and black and white. I'm not sure what else, if he used gray or not. Russ, if you have the colors you used in Slimer, let me know. Put it in the comments, and I'll put your comment up so everybody can see what that is. So that's Slimer. And the ability to do these things is just unending. And I have not fully got into the HueForge program right now, but there's lots of YouTube videos out there that will show you how to use it. And let me take this off to the side just for a second. So one of the videos I looked at that started me down the path of being able to use it, if we'll pull this up here, is then this video. And in this video, he goes through the process of how he makes this picture. Let me show you just a little touch of it. And so I'm gonna switch the sharing of my screen to this tab and play just a bit of it. All right, let's see here.
When you first open the software, you might be overwhelmed by how many parts there are to the interface. But some of these items are advanced, and I didn't need to touch them once. Just remember that there's specific video guides on the HueForge YouTube channel that explain these settings in more detail. Let's quickly drag in an image to make it easier to explain. Firstly, our lighting settings. I never played with these. An important area is the general options. we have our layer height, the default being 0.08, our base layer height, the default being 0.16, and our detail size, which is typically set to half the width of the nozzle, so 0.2 for a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Then we have width and height, which controls the size of the final STL. If you need to shrink or enlarge an image to suit your printer, here's where you do it. On the left, we have our filament library, and there really is a lot of filaments already inbuilt and calibrated, which is this number in the right-hand column. In the lower right, we have model geometry, and you probably won't need to touch these settings. I certainly didn't for any of the examples you see in this video. Finally, in the lower left, we have our most important section, which is called color sliders. And anything not set to 0 is a color that will be used in our print. We can see here that we start with black and it prints till layer 7, then gray will print until layer 12, a lighter gray until layer 18, and then white through to the end, layer 24. To introduce different colors, we simply drag them down to one of the sliders, and our preview will update instantly. For the most part, using HueForge simply means importing an image, setting the size, dragging down the filaments you want to use, and then playing with the sliders until you get the appearance that you're after. And once you're happy, you come up to File and save your project. This will not only save the project file, but also a copy of the original image, the STL ready to go into the slicer, and a text file called Describe with our instructions for the colors to load, as well as when to swap between them. And back in HueForge, we can get the same information by clicking on the Describe button. We'll now work our way through some example projects, starting by adding and calibrating our own.
So as you can see, the program isn't that complicated to look at. When you start looking at this program and you know anything about your 3D printer, and by the time you get your 3D printer and up, you'll find that it becomes pretty second nature to you about what he's talking about. So I just went down this rabbit hole, and I haven't started printing the stuff that Russ has printed, but I would like, here, let me answer this question. How do you store your filament when you're not using it? So if you've been into 3D printing in the past, you know that there can be a challenge with moisture, especially if you're in a high humidity area. So I have it right now still. I haven't opened up very many that need to be left open, Ellen, but I have some vacuum storage bags I can use. And I also, the bamboo printer will allow you to dry out your filament. So right now, most of my filament I either store in those bags or I actually just store it open. I'm not in a very high humid area, but there's lots of information out there. And I know people that just store it without any concern, especially PLA. If you start getting into somewhat of the more exotic like ABS and stuff like that, it has a tendency to attract moisture. And if it does collect moisture, then what you need to do is just put it in a dryer. And dryers are relatively cheap. So is HueForge for bamboo, and it's free. So HueForge is for any, I should have put this up here. Tim asked, is HueForge for bamboo and is it free? Actually, HueForge is for any printer, any Prusa, Cura, whatever printer you want. And it is not free, but it's relatively free. It's 18. I haven't checked it recently, but this guy will tell you that was on this video before. It's $18.99 for a lifetime license for personal use. If you want something for commercial use or something, it's a different price, and I haven't looked into it. But it's not very expensive. And Brooks Martin, hey, Russ is teaching tech your YouTube channel. Well, it's not his YouTube channel. That's not him. But he is taking me to new limits and pushing me sometimes. And so let's go to some other things that I did with it. Now, some of you may, let me put this down. Some of you may know that here's a couple more. Let me show a couple more of Russ's multicolor prints that aren't as exotic. So there's a light box that he did out of 3D prints, and he's got light behind it right now, or it might be just shining through the window. And then when he first showed that to me, when Russ first showed that to me, I thought he was doing epoxy or laser work, and that was acrylic. But then he told me, no, that was 3D printed. Here's another example of a color print that he sent to me from his collection of what he's doing. And this one here, I don't know what he calls it. I'll call it the Storm. And again, very impressive. Russ, did you say this was an 8 print? And he said he made the Slimer with glow-in-the-dark filament. So that Slimer that he did, that one is actually glow-in-the-dark filament. So can you imagine how cool that looks when he does it at night and puts the right light to it? I mean, that's got to be really awesome. So Kurt says, on the Waves and Storms, what was the runtime to do this, Russ? And by the way, Russ said that that was 7 colors. Let me bring that one back up. That was 7 colors that he used. So he used 2 AMS units. And let's, Russ, when you get a chance, if you can tell him what the runtime or what you think the runtime was on that, that'd be great. And so that was pretty cool. And then, I think everybody can see it, but just in case you don't see his comment, Russ says that took 10 hours for him to print that. And Russ, what's the size of that? About 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters, 200 millimeters by 200. The bamboo print area is about 250 by 250. And I think Russ says he takes up most of the print area when he does these. Yeah, that's not bad for the detail. And if you can see, Russ, Kurt's asking how large was that? So Russ says, yeah, it was 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters. So you can do the conversion and see what that takes. So then the other things he showed me that obviously didn't send me down the rabbit hole as much, but I knew could be done that were pretty cool, was this Chinese Lupon box that he built. So that's all 3D printed. And the best thing, not the best thing, but one of the cool things about the bamboo ecosystem, it's kind of like Apple, guys, gals. It's like a whole ecosystem. Like they've blown away the 3D printing world, and everybody else is doing catch up based on all of my research. And the amazing thing is they have a file repository. So they also have, just like Vectric and everything else does, their own forums and user groups where they talk back and forth. But they have a gazillion files out there that are already made. All you have to do is download it to your printer. In fact, you say, send it to my printer, my bamboo printer, and it goes right to your printer. You don't even have to take it to your computer and load it first. It just goes straight to your bamboo printer. And not only that, you can run your printer and watch what's going on with your printer from your phone with a little app. Let's call it up. So you have this. Oh, it's disappearing. There we go. So you have this app where you can run. If I turn it a certain way, the angle of the camera makes it disappear. So, but it's all on my phone. And so you don't even have to stay by the printer. You can go ahead and either use it from your computer or remotely, which is pretty cool. So let's see here. Okay, you're answering a color back. That's good. So now let me do one other thing. So here's another thing that Russ sent me, and this was some 3D printed angels that hang on the corner of the door. And so that's pretty cool too, but it didn't inspire me as much as the other ones. Let me show you a couple things I've done based on me going down this rabbit hole. So I showed you the Trump coaster before, and one of my big sellers when I was selling stuff last year, and the same thing is going to happen this year. The big seller for people, if you're into like doing commission work or trying to make money on Etsy or selling your stuff, and mine was all done with my laser for the most part. That's where most of my money was made. And it was, excuse me, it was doing coasters, not coasters, ornaments. It was doing ornaments and earrings, specialized earrings. And after I saw this, I said, why am I going to all of the challenge of doing the earrings the way that I do them, where they are complex to put together and small to deal with. And you have to deal with the size of the kerf and everything else. So I took my earring patterns, my SVGs, now that I knew how to do two-color 3D prints, and I started taking the earrings that I used to do with acrylic or plywood and painted, because a lot of times I would have to hand paint them, and I don't do hand painting. My daughter would do those for me. So here's a bat earring that's 3D printed. Excuse me. Here's some skeleton hands. Those new this year. I didn't have to 3D print them, but you can see how delicate they are and how easy it was to print them up. So here's some cowboy ghost earrings. So, okay. Thank you, Tim. Let's go back to sharing the screen. I unshared it so you could see my phone, which didn't work real well. So there we go. So there's some bat earrings that I do. And in the past, I would have cut these out of acrylic, black acrylic, or I would have painted MDF or Baltic birch black. And I would have asked my daughter to finally paint the white on there. And so you can do these on your laser and they work just fine. But this 3D print has made it so much easier. That's a skeleton hand, not multicolor. Here's some cowboy ghost earrings that we'll be selling. Now, these things, the amazing thing is it costs me in filament, it cost about 20 to 50 cents for these earrings. Then you put the loops on it, maybe you're up to 75 cents to $1 to make these earrings, and they sell all day for anywhere between $10 and $20 in the local area. So it's quite profitable if you actually want to make some money from it, but it's also adorable and cute and less work because there's no painting. Here's some pumpkin earrings that I put together. Now, I used to make these out of acrylic, and I would make them so that there was a kerf offset for those that are familiar with, and I would take orange acrylic and black acrylic, and I glue these together. Here's some spider earrings, and in the past, they were just black, but I turned around and I put red in there to make them a black widow spider. That was just something I did this year because I could do the two-color prints. Here's an ornament that I sell for people that are religious, and it's not as high quality yet. I'm still working on this, and but it was my first draft. And then the other thing I did that was interesting is, even though I didn't mix colors together, is I built this. Let's see if I can get the full one. But we'll just go through these. So there it is. So I built this storage box, and this is literally about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different prints that I did. So the first thing I did was I printed the bottom, then I printed each of the sides you see there, then I printed the top, and then I printed each drawer. This took me probably about probably close to 17 hours of printing for all of them together. So it was quite a bit. In any event, I probably talked enough about my rabbit hole and how I got there. Any other follow-up questions on that? So now I figured I might want to do one other thing with this because Russ had brought it up before. I'm going to turn around and see, let's see how well my computer operates. So in Russ's stuff that he shared with me, let me see if I can pull it up. So you might remember these angels. And Russ was asking while we were talking, could you actually do these out of wood now that he's got a alt mill CNC and he's starting to get into the CNC stuff and he's got a spire. And I said, as long as you've got an STL, Russ, as long as you got an STL, we can do whatever you want with this. And so let me show you what I did. I need to make sure I can get his file. So let me take a minute to look for his file. And so I went and I took Russ's file, and it might be if I just pull up Aspire here, might still be in the queue. And let's see here. We have it. Cowboy Ghost, Think Celestial, Ashley. No, I don't see them in there right now. So let me go ahead and open an existing file, and we'll go see if I can find where I forgot to pull this file aside, where I put his files. Let's open up another sheet so I can show you how I did this. We're going to go ahead and open up a imported component or 3D model. And he gave me an SVG, or an STL, I should say, not an SVG. So I think this is it. Let me see if I grab the right one. So there we are. Bring that up. And this is how his STL came in. Right click and you can see it has an underside and a top. And I didn't realize that when I first saw his model. He clarified that to me later. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the model and I'm going to say scale millimeter to inches, because you can see this is way too big. That means it came in as millimeters. So we scaled it to inches, and we can either leave it this size or we can change it. I'm just going to leave it this size for right now. I'm going to center the model. And now that I centered the model, I'm going to position and import the model. And I think, let me go back for a second. Here, let me go back. Let me cancel this. And I want to make this right. The first time I didn't realize it was a two-sided model. So I gave him a version of it that wasn't two-sided. So I need to make this a two-sided model. And now that it's single-sided, I need to change it to two-sided. And I know this model's just a little less than 1.25 inches, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to machine material surface. Each time I'm going to hit OK. So now we're going to have a two-sided model when we get done. And we're going to hope my Mac cooperates. And so now that we've got a two-sided model, I can tell, because this toggle here tells me I can toggle between one-sided or two-sided. So now I'm going to import this component, or STL. I'm going to import this STL right here, hit open. So now I'm going to go back here like I did before, scale millimeter to inches. Its total thickness is 1.15. We had 1.25. And so now I want to center the model, position and import. And now what I want to do is I'm using my right mouse and I'm moving it around. And you can see it's split the model just at a good location, because there's where it goes down and there's where it's flat. And so we don't have to move it one way or the other, but let me show you how you would do that. So if I moved this up, then you can see it's not going to carve the top angel. If I move it down, so you can see it, if I move it down, then I move it down too far, it's going to try to carve the whole thing on the top, but it can't do that because the wood isn't thick enough. And so now what you see is you're going to have a problem. So now what you want to do is you want to bring it down. And it's probably easiest to look at it from the side. And so you want to make it so that when you're coming up, you want to make it so that when you're coming up, see how you see the angel starting to appear? You don't want that. You want it right, too much. It's hard to get this to get just right with my Mac. So what I'm trying to do is get right to this point right here, where there's no overhang. Okay, that looks good right there. So you see that? I do want the data, and I want to create both sides because I want a two-sided model. Okay, I'm looking over at the comments for a second just to make sure I'm not missing anything. So now that I have this model in here so that I can get both sides the way I want it, I go ahead and I import this model. So now you can see the model. Let me go to top here. Get a good look at it. Imported sideways. That's okay with me. So that's the top of the model. And that's going single-sided, toggle between single-sided and double-sided. So now let's turn it over. That's the bottom of the model. So you see the lip there that it's going to hang on the door with. All right. Flip it back over now. And now we're back on the top of the model. And so now what we want to do is we want to set up our tool paths. So if you come over here to components, we're going to go to the limit plane. I think is probably good based on having set it correctly at the beginning. The limit plane, if I moved it down, that would mean that this model would carve deeper, but we don't need to do that in this case. And so we're going to go ahead and go to tool paths. We're going to select the Angel deck right, put the tool paths over here, and normally you do a roughing tool path. And so I'm going to make my roughing tool path with a, it's telling my 1.25 inches is my material. That's correct. I like to take this down to about 0.02. And the only reason I do that is probably easier to type it. The reason I do that is to make sure there's no flat spots accidentally on the top of the model. And so we've got that all set up, and now we can hit OK. And now we'll do our well, let's go back here to 2D view for a second, and let's click on this, and let's go to design. And we're going to put a vector around that model. Now that we have a vector, we're going to go to selected vectors. So I'm going to pick that vector right there. So now we've got the model, selected vectors, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to put a boundary at 0.25 because I'm not going to have any bits bigger than that. And I'm going to hit Z level, and I'm going to hit calculate. Hit preview visible toolpath. So this is my roughing toolpath. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to set up a, so we can see it better, a finishing toolpath. And I'm going to use a 1/4 inch tapered ball nose, and then I'm going to use a 1/8 inch ball nose. I probably only need the 1/8 inch. So let me go ahead and just remove that for now. Selected vectors, raster 90 degrees. I like to go with the grain, hit calculate. And so now we're going to go ahead and preview that. And that's what the top of his angel is going to look like. And then if you flip it over now, and you come in here, and let's put a vector around that one. Now, I'm not going to bother to put in the 3D tabs. You would need to put in 3D tabs if you did this, but I wanted to show you how we could go about doing this. Then we go in and we take and I'm just going to go straight to a finish toolpath. You would not do this, but just to speed up this demo, I'm going to hit calculate. telling me I didn't select that vector. There we go. Hit calculate. We're going to hit preview visible. So now you have the visible back, what it's seeing on the back. So this is a ledge that goes in front of the wall, and this is the door. And just for kicks, again, I would put 3D tabs in here, but what I want to do is go ahead and do a profile toolpath. And I'm going to go to Z. And when I go to Z, I'm going to go ahead and hit a 1/4 inch. Well, that's not it. That's a round over. There's a 1/4 inch down shear end mill. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go on the outside right and hit calculate. Hit preview. Get rid of this material. And now what you see is you've got that door hanger with the lip set up to go over the end of the door. Let me preview the whole thing again now. Preview all sides. So there's your door hanger. You can sit on the back of the wall. And so that just shows you the other cool thing about these prints that you do with your 3D printer. The point I was making is you can take your STLs that were made for 3D printing and turn them into 3D wooden carved models. And you could make that bigger or smaller, however you wanted, whatever you wanted to do. Any questions? Any comments? All right, with that, I just wanted to share the versatility of what you could do with your multicolor printing. And I probably don't really have enough time to go into, let me take this and close it. I don't have enough time to actually go into the other stuff I was going to get into, with the exception of, let me show you, I think I showed you last time you were here, the Barrio Logan vCarve that I was going to do. And so were there any questions about that process of how I was going to vCarve? Let me open it up. This logo. So my plan right now is I'm going to start on this project in the next couple days. And if you recall, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to first carve it with no epoxy. So this is what the sign's going to look like, just carved with a vCarve process. And actually, I've used a couple tapered ball noses along the way too. So, and I use those using a regular pocket tool path. And so I've got a mixture of a pocket tool path and vCarving in here to try to get the effects that I want. And what I mean by that is I want to see this Maltese Falcon or Maltese Cross here. I wanted to see that more as a pocket. And so I'm using a tapered ball nose to do that versus a V-bit. And so that was one area where I knew I was going to use a tapered ball nose. And I think in several of these others, it's the same thing. And that's why you see them, instead of looking like a bunch of squiggly lines like a V-bit normally, I'm using a tapered ball nose to try that impact. And I'm going to do this first. I haven't done it that way in the past, so I'm going to do this first on a practice piece of MDF before I actually carve into the wood itself. And the last thing that I've been working on, and I'm in the middle of making a video on this now, are these measurement charts. So I've been working on using the tiling toolpath. And so this is a project where I am both using a laser and my CNC. So the CNC I'm using to carve into the board. And of course, my CNC is only 3 feet long. And this is, at the time of carving, it was a 6.5 foot board. And when I get done, it's a 6 foot board. So that meant I had to tile this 3 times down, and no overlapping vectors. Oh, on that, let's see here. So Lucky, I think you're talking about the Barrio Logan. And on the Barrio Logan sign, there are really no overlapping vectors except on the end from the black to the red when I do the multicolor. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. So once again, this is the board that we're doing, and I used the laser to cut out the 3D letters. And this one, I wanted it to have a 3D effect, and so I used the laser to cut these out. And the way I did that, I think is probably obvious to people, but let me kind of show you real quickly what I did. So if we go back to vCarve, and I open up the chart, you can see this client actually, I'm going to hide this tiling toolpath. This client ordered 2 wall charts, 2 measurement charts, and she's ordered 2 what I'll call 1-year charts where she's going to put her grandchildren's pictures for each of these. So she contacted me and asked if I could design these, and I said, sure. This is what we agreed on, and we went with the 3D process. I'm working on the tiling video as we are talking. Hopefully it'll be out next week or later this week. And in my tiling video, my previous tiling video, I only used a fence on the left side to pull the board through. But because I was going to cut this edge, I wanted to have something that would give me the least chance of getting jagged edges. And so I literally used multiple alignment pins, 2 of them, 1 on each side, to help with the pulling the board through and not just relying on the fence. So in the video, I'll go through that. But what I was going to talk about is how I combined the laser with this project. Is this cursive writing needed to be done on the laser cut out, because we didn't want it inside carved like this. We wanted it to be like a 3D look. So all I did was, excuse me, is I took and I turned off everything that was not critical to be lasered. Then I turned around and I selected all of this. I went to File. I went to Export as an SVG. And then I went over to my vectors file. Put it in signs, Genie wall, shoot, wall, and year charts, save. Now I have that SVG there. I'm going to get out of here, hit exit. I'm going to open up Lightburn. I'm going to go to import. I saved it in a different spot, but this will do the same thing. So we're going to pull this one in. You'll see I saved it in a different spot. So now I have his name there, and now I can set up to cut this, resize it, cut it however I want in Lightburn, and then paint it. And the reason I would do that with the laser instead of trying to do that on the CNC is I can have much crisper lines. So instead of using my CNC, I'm only using 1/4 inch MDF to paint. I put 3M masking on the back of the name so I can not worry about having to CA glue it or anything else. And there you have it. When you're all said and done, what you have are these signs. And you've got the three charts that I got done today. And then you've got these all in 3D. So thought you might be interested in how I went about doing that. Well, that takes us to 5:27, 5:30. I like to respect your time. I usually like to do an hour plus or minus 15 minutes or so. With that, I'll ask, are there any follow-up questions or anything you would like me to address in the future or think that you need more information on right now? Not seeing any comments coming in. I guess it's about time to wrap this up and let you guys go have the rest of your evening for whatever it is you want to do. I will tell you that I am definitely down the rabbit hole and will be learning a lot more that I will share if you're interested on the 3D printing, but especially the multicolor 3D printing. Sometime in the next week or two, if I get these commission orders done, I want to actually explore the HueForge software myself so that I can make my own HueForge pictures. And it's also got me with this rabbit hole thinking about having an additional AMS. I think your Bamboo Lab printers can have up to 3 AMSs each, which means you can have up to 12 colors that you can connect to those printers. So you can imagine the amount of program colors. You can imagine the amount of colors you can get from a 3D print with 12 colors to mix. Now, the way it mixes is by laying layers on top of each other. So one layer is actually impacted by another. And we'll go into that sometime in the future after I learn more about the program. The way I make my multicolor prints, like the pumpkin earrings and the Trump earrings and stuff, it's a combination between Fusion 360 and the bamboo slicer. So I actually use Fusion 360, and I'm going to put out a video on that sometime in the next couple of weeks. So if you're used to Fusion 360, it'll be very easy for you to pick up. If you're not used to Fusion 360, the same things can be done with programs like Tinkercad and other free programs that can turn SVGs into STLs. The key is you have to bring in an STL. It can be very time consuming, Sargon. You're absolutely right. So with that, once again, I'll sign off. Let you guys all have the rest of your night. I appreciate you taking the time of sharing with me, and have a great week. Have a great 2 weeks until we get back together. Next week, I think Shane will come on with me. And Shane is what I've asked him to talk about at the request of Jim Matthews, and he's agreed to, is how he goes about figuring out to make his skin tones, how he mixes the colors and in what order. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know he brought that up before, but most of us have forgot what he said, and this time, hopefully, we'll capture it a little bit better. With that, good night until we meet again. Goodbye.